During this EcoTalk, we'll learn more about the American Kestrel. So Dr. Don Althoff was a professor at Rio University, and he continues to pursue long-term monitoring projects for bluebirds, tree swallows, warblers, and kestrels, and especially flying squirrel research as well. So he did a EcoTalk on southern flying squirrels a year or two ago now, where some of you I know attended and learned more about that. But today we'll be learning more about American kestrels, so let's welcome Don for his EcoTalk.
Thank you, Lisa and Josh, for giving me this opportunity. I'm going to start off though with.
Hey Don, do you want the microphone, real quick?
Can you hear me?
Because some folks can be hard of hearing and maybe not want to admit it. So.
Anybody having trouble hearing me right now? You're good? Okay, I'll try to do it.
I can hear you right now.
Okay. How many of you know Lisa? Okay. No. Besides this individual here, how long have you known Lisa?
Lisa was in me,
Yeah. How long
a
have you known
leadership
Lisa?
program with me, an environmental leadership program.
For like how many years back?
3 years ago?
Okay, so you're the only one that can vouch for this. I've known Lisa for about 5 years, all right? And she had, at that time, she had a last name, started with a Z, had a K, had an I in it, all right? And so I really struggled to even want to pronounce her last name and then to spell it. And then, starting about a year and a half ago or so, I get these emails from a Lisa Hill. And I don't recognize what's going on. So she went and got married. Because this is one, I really like you, Lisa, but you went ahead and you got married, and she didn't keep her maiden name. She changed it to Hill. It would have been so much easier for me if you would have kept your last name. Okay? So I appreciate that. So tonight we're going to get a history lesson. So how many came to hear about history? Did?
A little bit.
A little bit. What was your favorite subject in school?
Social studies.
Social. Okay. So you actually might enjoy this then. It's going to be a history lesson. Let's see if this thing works the way it's supposed to. Okay. So I got 3 chapters. This is what the road we're gonna follow tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about my early history with kestrels, how I first got involved with them. And I'm looking around, and I'm pretty close to the oldest guy in the room here, if not possible. So I am going way back in time. Then we'll talk about natural history. Some of this information is readily available on the web, and some of it is not. Some of it's a little bit of background information. But anyway, I think you'll find it interesting because this really is a fascinating species. And then recent history, which in this case is the last 27 years, in which I've been involved with monitoring some kestrel boxes in southeast Ohio. So we'll transition between one to the other, and again, hopefully be enough science and ecology. And there's lots of pictures, but there's also some videos with some pretty short handling process and such. And there's a few graphs, all right? So I feel it's necessary to present data and show some trends. So we'll go from there. 1976 was the first time I ever got my hands on a kestrel. This is not a kestrel. Does anybody recognize this species? That's actually, back in 1976, most people called this a marsh hawk. But today it's known as a northern harrier. Now that is me, one with a little more hair on the backside, a little darker color. But I was a student at Ohio State University, and I got to be a work study and got connected because I took an animal behavior course at Ohio State. The teaching assistant at that time, Keith Bilstein, we kind of hit it off, and so he got me on this work study. And what my job was to go into his lab that he had on the edge of the High State campus, and he had 2 of these, and he had 2 kestrels. Now, unfortunately, I didn't take a picture of those kestrels at the time, but one was named Tweedledee and the other named Tweedledum. And my responsibility was to go in about 3 days a week and take some laboratory mice out of the mouse production / food cafeteria center and take them, funk the head, and then throw them in the cage for the kestrels to eat. So that was my very first exposure to raptors, and so that was pretty exciting. Well, it turned out in this day Dr. Bilstein, but he invited me to participate in a study. So, and this is the lab study. Now, if you're not familiar with this species, you've probably seen these, maybe going down the highway, though, wonder what it was. It's one of the 3 species in Ohio that hovers. Okay? There is the rough-legged hawk, which is a much bigger hawk, and you're probably not going to see this hovering like over median strips and highways. The belted kingfisher, which is going to be over aquatic habitat, it also hovers. And then there's this guy that's kind of in between size-wise, which is American Kestrel. So one of the things that was curious to Keith was, what is the advantage of doing that hovering over an area, thinking you're going to spot a mouse in most cases that might be moving through the grass? So he got thinking about this, and so maybe we can do an experiment in the lab and flesh something out here. So he had captured these birds before, and he took me out one time because we were going to try to get some more kestrels. And he used this, which is called a bell-chatry or bell-chatry trap. And basically it's about this size, all right, it has a bunch of nooses on it. And the idea is that you have a bird, you usually have a mouse, and sometimes they use white mice, sometimes you use brown mice, and you put them inside there. When you're driving along a country road and you happen to see a kestrel that would be perched up on a power line, at least we're going to try this. I'm not sure. I'll probably have to exit out of this. We can check to see if the internet was working or not. I forgot about this one. I know this won't. Can you just copy that and actually, we have to exit for a moment. Let's see if we can play this video. Yeah, okay. So let's just listen and watch for a moment. These unbelievably are actually white-crowned sparrows in here. I don't know how they got permission to do this years ago. So it's actually caught one of the nooses on at least one of its feet. The trap is heavy enough that it can't pull it up. Of course, everybody you see here is terrified at this moment. But pretty shortly, someone will come up. Normally you're getting 50 to 75 to 100 yards away from this, and you're watching with binoculars to see the moment that the bird has come down. So it takes a little bit of time once you want to get right back to it. Okay, so you saw that part. So anyway, we were hoping to capture another kestrel, and we were going to try to train it so that it would fly from one of us to a perch. Well, Tweedledee or Tweedledum would cooperate in this setup. But in the lab, in a room about half this size, we had one perch where we were expecting the bird to basically be, and we had a caged area below. We made these little Coke can cubby holes for the mice to live in, one at a time. And when it came time to do our little flyover, then we took this little plunger, and the plunger basically pushed the mouse out. So now the mouse is exposed, and our hope was that we could just do this flyover, not that it would hover, but just want to fly over to see what the reaction would be of the kestrel. Well, kestrels were not cooperative. Okay? They didn't buy into this. So our alternative was basically we made a silhouette and we flew it over. And this gave us a little more control because we could pause it partway over. And the short of the story is we did this with a species called the meadow vole, little mice. Come back to those a little bit. We did this with we're equivalent to a deer mouse at different times, and ran many trials to see what the reaction was, of the animal below, and of course the silhouette had no reaction, but if in fact, in theory, if hovering matters, if we stop that silhouette in the middle, we would expect those mice to move a little bit more. Okay? And so that was the experiment. And it turned out that indeed, in doing this, they did react. The mice did react essentially the way we kind of predicted, especially the deer mice a little bit more than the other ones. But it gave some justification for why the kestrels would hover. So for me, this was just really cool. First of all these ideas were keys. I just got to be a part of cranking the silhouette across and things like that. But it was a spark for me very early in my career to see how you do experiments in this case. And it was with a really cool bird. Unfortunately, it wasn't flying back and forth with the bird with this lab setup. Okay, so that was 1976. I'll fast forward 10 years, and I made another trip out to Nebraska, and because I'd gone to school out there, and so I drive around and I was usually looking for other birds, but I had a chance to see a kestrel perched somewhere. I wanted to try to get a really good photograph. So I know this isn't a great photograph, but this was like 35 millimeter slide that I scanned this in. So you lose a little bit of the quality over time. And then in 1996, when I was living in Lancaster, Ohio, a friend had a factory, and they actually had kestrels nest in the building. They found a hole from the outside, and they nested. And I took my daughter at that time, and we actually took out one of the chicks, and this little chick was very cooperative and just sat on her shoulder. So, had that little connection going with kestrels. And now we fast forward to 2025, and now I've been doing this monitoring for a while. So really, history for me is that I've been very interested in kestrels for a very long time, very fascinated by this species. And it's kind of cool because you can usually down some country road in the wintertime. If you're looking, you shouldn't be looking on the side of the road, but you're looking to try to find these, and you get a chance to see them. Okay, so let's go to natural history here for a moment. Get this one up. Okay, so the distribution of this species all over North America, even down into Central America and South America. Now you notice that there's no lines that are indicating that there's this big migration. So these are not like neotropical migrants, like warblers that are passing through right now. They're not going that far. But you can see at the brown part, that indicates that usually those birds in the wintertime or late fall, early winter, they actually are migrating a little further south. They need to because they can't really sustain themselves during the winter. That lavender color there is pretty much those individuals, for the most part that are adults, do not migrate out. They stay pretty much in their local area. They might go a little further south. And then the greenish color there that represents parts of Louisiana and Texas and into Mexico. There might be some that actually that's where they migrate to if they go that far. But anyway, very wide distribution, so quote, a very common species. If you look at the migration routes, though, in just the United States, what they've been able to determine is that you kind of get stuff, if you look to the eastern side of this map, you can see that they're basically kind of going coastal. which puts them away from what? The Appalachian hilly mountainous region there. You see on the left, though, for the most part, they're going straight south. So we've learned a little bit more about this over time, but we haven't, it's going to take a lot of birds, a lot of banding, a lot of modus marking of birds to confirm this. I find this a pretty interesting map here because it does kind of say here on a parallel basis, 44, 36, where these birds are not migrating and where they are. So we're clearly in Ohio, we're in an area that our birds that are raising young right now, at least the adults, are going to be here this year, 12 months a year, the next year, the next year, the next year, most likely. Okay, diet. I mentioned earlier, when I first got introduced to bird, it was called the sparrowhawk. It was not called the kestrel. And it's pretty much, not many people refer to this anymore, at least in the United States, as the sparrowhawk anymore. I don't know why I got that name, other than probably somebody saw it take sparrows, but for the most part, that's not their main diet. I don't think they take very many of these. They probably take in June, July, maybe August, they might take some relatively young. Some birds that are just fledgling. But for the most part, they are not chasing down and catching in midair sparrows. If it's a good year for grasshoppers, they will eat grasshoppers. Open up boxes and found just legs in the boxes. So this can become a very protein-rich source. As you may well know, most insects are about 50% protein, so it's a really good thing to be eating. But for the most part, they go after these two species. And the right is the one I was mentioning earlier about, this is the meadow vole. And these guys can be up to, in some places, up to 100 individuals an acre. And they usually are in relatively short grass. So if you have tall grass, you're not going to find kestrels being able to dive down and get to those. So that's an important thing. And our little highway median strips, we probably, because they're mowing them, what, 2-3 times a year, you're probably getting some good populations there. So that's probably what they're finding in those median strips. The other species here is either the deer mouse or the white-footed mouse. They are in a variety of habitats. They can be in grass, they can be old field, they can be on the edge of the woods, and I'm sure they can eat some of those. But these are the morsels, and if you would drive down a road and you'd actually see a kestrel on a wire and you see something dangling from it, I would say probably 9 out of 10 times it's that species on the right. It's the meadow vole. Now, meadow voles are pretty much eastern United States. If you start to go west, there's a couple other species, but voles across most of North America are a major food item for this species, and they're active all year long. Those are available all year long, so that's another reason that they would be very attracted to them. All right, nesting. These are the eggs. See, my fingers are about this size, eggs. They come out with speckles, quite a bit of variation. You might not see too much in this one, but clearly it's a kind of a not a very pointed egg at one end, because these are cavity nesters. And cavity nesters typically have more pointed eggs because they don't want them to roll around too much. But they can not have to be super pointed because they're usually in a cavity, so they're not going to fall. If you're a peregrine falcon, your eggs are probably pointed a little bit more because they're usually nesting on a ledge or a cliff. And even though there's nesting material there, it just keeps them in place. I want to cover what's referred to as a synchronous versus an asynchronous hatch. And what this means is, if we have, almost all the bird species lay 1 egg a day. Maybe for some species, it's usually larger ones, it may take 2 days after they lay an egg. But most small birds lay 1 egg a day. So these 6 eggs didn't show up in one morning. At least we're talking about 6 different mornings that they dropped down. Okay, so first egg there, second egg there, third egg there, fourth egg there, fifth egg, sixth egg. So that represents 6 different days. And if you can imagine here that in a normal setting, like robins and cardinals, they wait till all the eggs are laid, and then they sit and they incubate. Well, it's very possible for the kestrel that once the second egg is laid, or maybe it's not until the third, then they start to sit on the nest, and now you're heating up 1 or 2 or 3 eggs, and whoop, add another one the next day, and what basically is happening there? Well, in this case, you have the oven got turned on at different times for these eggs, and so they're not developing all at the same rate. And the strategy here is basically, if you fast forward for just a moment, if it's a really good year in terms of food abundance, everybody ought to do pretty well. But if it's not a good year for food abundance, then at least maybe 1 or 2 of the chicks are in really good shape, and the others may perish, but at least some may. So they're going to hatch a little bit earlier, and let's say that those 2 eggs were the first ones laid, and therefore they're the best chance that they're going to be incubated the first. It basically happens. So we have what's called an asynchronous hatch. And in this picture, what I hope you can see are a bunch of chicks, but you see here one with a lot of down feathers, which means probably it was the last one to hatch. And if it's sitting on the eggs was basically started after the second or third or fourth egg was laid, this would explain why this one's behind. Now, I lived with that thought in my mind until a year and a half ago. And I'll mention this a little bit later briefly, but there's another group that's been studying and monitoring kestrels north of Columbus. If you've ever heard of Dick Tuttle, Mr. Bluebird, he started this box set, and so they followed up. But they've taken video cameras and they've put them inside the box. And what he basically was identifying was that there were still instances where you had some that weren't as far along as others. And I've already explained to you that you could have an asynchronous hatch. But the other possibility, even if mom and dad waited till all the eggs were laid and the hatch was synchronous, how could you still end up with some chicks behind in terms of development? And so it's this possibility they don't get provisions equally. So he has actual video where he's cameras in the same position all the time. The chicks are in these same positions most of the time, and the female's coming in, and she's ripping off little mouse parts or sparrow parts, and she's feeding number 1 and number 4, and maybe not feeding 2 and 3 regularly. And he has some videos showing that this was actually happening, and explains why some were behind compared to others. So it could be, again, 2 reasons: asynchronous hatch, or it could be a relatively synchronous hatch, but not everybody's getting fed at the same time. Now, I think he had about 4 or 5 boxes. He had cameras with this going on. He found some adults would move around the box and make sure everybody got fed. But he had others that were doing this. So 2 possible explanations for why that's going on. All right. I want to acknowledge here several folks, and normally you wait to acknowledgements at the end or maybe at the beginning, but I want to throw them in here because this is how this program basically got going. And the reason for it. I was originally at Hockey College when we first decided we were going to do this project, and since after a few years away from hockey, came back to Ohio at the University of Rio Grande. So we had students involved, and that was usually quite helpful with this project. I also want to acknowledge that to have permission to ban, because this is a federally protected species, not endangered or listed, but essentially you just can't go any time to do this. I want to acknowledge that the folks at Wildlife Services, USDA, I'm a sub-permittee on their overall U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service ban. I also have a state of Ohio permit, the two have to be in tandem to basically allow them to handle in-demand birds. Also want to acknowledge where we have access, where we have these boxes up. And originally we started with billboard signposts, and a company in Lancaster, Ohio, an outdoor company, allowed us to put them on any box, on any post that they had. They did have two questions though when we asked for permission to do this. Anybody want to take a guess as to what the two questions they asked us? Putting boxes up. Yes.
Would they poop on the billboard?
Exactly. Yes. Will they get on the top and basically shoot droppings down? Well, most of you know, for the most part, adults throw out pellets, and so this was no problem. It was no issue that they basically were that. Okay, so we said that doesn't happen. The other one was, you got 1 out of 2 here. Maybe a second. What happens if somebody falls off the ladder while you're doing this? Are we going to be liable? And we had anticipated that question, and at the time we said no, this would be a university activity, and the students participating, whether in a class or club activity, would be covered. Now the good news is we never had a ladder fall over, nobody fall off. But anyway, two very reasonable questions. But aside from that, really appreciate that they've allowed us to do this, and we've had boxes on some of their billboard signs now for 27 years. I'll explain how we work these folks, but more recently, the Ohio Department of Transportation has allowed us to put boxes on the back of some signs. And for the record, we do have 2 people here today who actually grew up near Bidwell. Willing to put your hand up to say, Chuck, you got to admit it.
I didn't hear you. I was talking.
He grew up.
Just raise your hand.
Yes, I did. My ex-wife doesn't know where this time is.
So in this case, the Ohio Department of Transportation, the one thing we have to show, multi-page form we have to fill out, is we have to show we have insurance that in case we inflict any damage to the sign, that we're able to cover, which, yeah. So anyway, we're doing this. So appreciate that and their help. Right. So the whole idea for this, putting these boxes up, actually for me started with what was going on in Iowa. And I was attending a wildlife conference in the mid-'80s, and actually met Miss Doug Andrews, and they got the idea. They said, we have all of this really good habitat along interstates. In their case, I-80 was the main one. I know some of you travel out there where you might have been out before, but much like I-70 around here, you got a lot of large grassy median strips, and the right-of-ways are pretty grassy. So they put these up, and they had just wonderful success with them. So I've now traveled in many states where I really don't look at the signs on this side of the road. I find myself looking across the other side to see what the, and I've always wondered over the years how many people wonder, what is that box on the other side of the road? Once they do that. So they're kestrel boxes. Okay. So Hawkins started this in 1966 and started checking it out. We got the first boxes made 13 in 1997. And by 1998, we were putting them up along US 33. So that roughly runs from Columbus down to Athens and a little beyond. We weren't clear up to Columbus, but we had some there. Okay. And an original goal here really was not so much the long-term monitoring, but to give students hands-on opportunities. And that's what we meant, because it's pretty cool to hold one of these birds and be this close to it. All right. As we got going and we had success because we had birds in the boxes, then we started basically trying to look at occupancy and what does that mean, you know, how often and what boxes were occupied, which ones weren't. And of course doing some banding, and we do this banding when they're close to being able to fledge, and I'll explain why we wait until they're close to being fledged as opposed to when they're just a couple of days old or whatever. So this is the general design, and I do have that little device that's there. For those who have kind of rigged things up yourself before, you can't go to Walmart and buy one of these, but I kind of rigged up this little deal. And you'll see in a moment here where we use a pole, where we try to sneak up and plug the box so that we can open it up and see what's there. But the box is the key to the whole thing in terms of attractiveness here. So 27 years ago, 1998, we were in these 3 counties. I put a dot on here. reference, of course, to where we are tonight. In 1998, we had them in Fairfield County, Hocking County, and Athens County. And these are all along 4-lane highway corridors. In 2014, we expanded over to Ross County, so roughly between Circleville and Chillicothe. I was driving that road on a regular basis, visiting my sister and my mom who lived in Columbus. And I'm like, we gotta have boxes up on these. And Nauman, the billboard company, had lots of billboards, so they put them up. And I was kind of naive because I'm thinking, okay, there's a pole, it's not all forested, we should have kestrels that show up in these boxes. You'll find out later that that wasn't the case. In 2015 is when it started to add on to state highway signs. So we added Gallia County, Meigs County, and Vinton County to our list. And in 2017, those boxes that I put up a few years later, and I'll explain exactly why, but we took all those down. We took them all down, took them all off the billboards, and it had nothing to do with Nauman being happy with us. Okay, so the box count. Basically, we've been as high as 50 boxes out there. Currently, we have 34. We have 17 on the back of highway signs. We have 14 still on billboards. And then I have 3 out at a farm close to Rio Grande, Ohio, on 4x6 posts. So a little history and maybe quote concern about what's going on with kestrels. There was a research paper put out in 2009. And they use BBS data, which is breeding bird survey data. You might know that those things are done usually in June across the country. They're monitoring, trying to track all species of birds. And if you break up the regions of the country, all those red areas, those are indication that the numbers were dropping. Now the good news is in region 3, which Ohio was in that one, we were one of those that it stayed pretty much steady. It wasn't really a drop. But nonetheless, it seemed important to find out what's going on there. Okay. When they broke it up by particular regions in more detail, let's just look at all those lines, and essentially what it's showing for the most part is, since 1995, roughly, kestrels have been in decline. And so that's been a concern. And there's been a task force that just completed a big working group, and there's some things that come out here, but we really don't know yet what it is. Could it be, I'll put us out a little bit later, could it be West Nile virus that could have been transferred maybe from starlings? Could we go starlings get that? Could it be pesticides or habitat use? Could it be just simply winters are too tough in some of these areas? Where we have boxes that are put up, and are the birds actually getting hit maybe by vehicles? What is it? So none of these things have been singled out as being the thing that's caused or resulted in this decline. And it could also possibly be because we just did a little better job of monitoring, and we're monitoring more areas, and so not every area is going to have exactly the same success everywhere. Okay, so here's our methods. We check the box the first time, usually in last week of April or early May. We're noting if it's occupied, and occupied mainly, hopefully for kestrels. If it's occupied, we're recording the number of eggs. If it's chicks, we're recording that. And if we've got starlings in there, we're recording that. At this time, it's usually too early to ban any chicks because we cannot determine the sex of those individuals yet. If it's a starling nest, we do move them out. That's an invasive species. They're not protected, and so we will destroy the eggs or dispatch the chicks. If we happen to catch an adult, we will do that too. But starlings are very persistent and take up these boxes. Again, I'll come back to this what we're going to learn with starlings. They are close to fledging time, which means these have about a 28 to 30 day from hatch to the fledge. We usually have to be on the other side of the 14 or 15 day mark to have enough that we can look at to do that banding. So very often when we're returning to a box and you're trying to figure out what's going on, we generally only return to the boxes that have shown occupancy. We don't go back through all the boxes if they had starlings, because more likely than not, we don't have any evidence that if we throw out the starlings that spring, that the kestrel suddenly shows up and takes it. Okay. So our focus has been basically proportion of boxes that are occupied by kestrels, proportion of boxes that have chicks that are ready to hatch and fledge, and that's basically saying they're successful in raising that clutch, and then the proportion of boxes with starlings. So now I'm going to get into a couple of charts and a couple of graphs. So bear with me for a little bit longer. There's some videos coming, but I think this is a message we can share about what we've observed in Southeast Ohio. Oops. So here's one video that I should be able to run here. Let's see if this goes. We're trying to be pretty quiet approaching. That plug is on the wrong pole. And then the first one on the ladder races over, goes up the pole, squeezes on the clamp, and ideally we get a chance to see what's in there.
Camera.
Take the box down.
Strap? Yeah. Or if they want to push it first? Do they always have the same head? Well, I thought the head was blue on the males. They look about the same. The only thing different, remember that male had one band, right? She's got many bands.
Okay, he's starting to describe how you tell males from females. We'll get back to that.
Cam.
Once it's an adult, you just let them fly off. You're not trying to put them back on your box. By the way, has any of you traveled from like Columbus to Lancaster to Marietta before? Okay. Logan, you go by Logan?
I go Columbus to Lancaster.
Okay. So, for about 12 years, we called this the Schmid Kestrel box. Schmid is a company that used to make folders for the older people in the group here. Remember we had paper file folders? We used to make a lot of those, and we always thought because that was the one box that we were almost sure every year when we showed up was going to have kestrels in it, and it would always fly over to the Schmid building. Unfortunately, about 3 years ago, that pattern ceased. Here's a couple of chicks that are probably maybe 2 days old. Now those 3 eggs in the background, at this point, this would suggest this was not a synchronous hatch. We could come back in a few days and see if the rest of them hatch, but we try to minimize the disturbance so we do not go in at that point. You see some egg fragments there. Now I'm going to start to point this out. It's a little bit, looks like plastering, a really bad plastering job on the side of these boxes. Let's see what we did with this one. You get this look like, who is that? As Lisa introduced, when she introduced me, she mentioned I work with flying squirrels. This is a whole different deal than flying squirrels. You open up lots of flying squirrels, you got to be ready to handle them. These guys are not very aggressive. They're not really going to take off any place. as youngsters, they can't fly yet. And by the way, I'll go down here. We do have a female on the left and a male on the right. And I'll come back to we're getting ready to band. So at this point, even though it has a lot of down on it, if the tail feathers have developed enough, and I'll have another close-up shot in a little bit, we can tell at that point whether we have a male or female. And at that point, we can band, and we won't return to the box. If you're interested afterwards, I have a pair of pliers that we use. They're a very special pair of pliers, and the bands are called butt-in tags. So they're just a very soft mono-metal, and you have a pair of pliers that splits them open like that, and then you put them in a plier set, and you put them around the leg, and then you can squeeze as hard as you want. You will not pinch the leg. The two ends will just butt back together again. So it's a very simple, easy, light tag. The not easy part is reading those 7 numbers that are on that little minuscule tag. You want to check one of those out to verify that's the case. So that's a common vocalization if we got a really little irritated kestrel chicken. They don't all talk to you, and every once in a while I might have a little bit of video coming up where I got 2 or 3 of them that are not happy. They're just making that same sound. Fresh battery in there. Fresh battery. Let's see what we got with this one. So pretty vocal, and you might have seen one of the individuals not wearing gloves, but most times we do wear the gloves. We're not concerned that they're really going to nip you, but their talons can be kind of sharp, so you'd be a little concerned when they grasp you, get off. But it's in situations like this that initially when you put your hand in there, they think you've got something to eat. So they're ready to grab and say, I'm going to get my piece. And very often they are on their backs, which is kind of crazy. Again, notice the inside of this box has basically been whitewashed. And a little bit more with this one. Now you can really see the whitewashing in here, including the roof, ceiling. Those basically have gone comatose. They have figured out what's going on, and they're not doing so well. Okay. So back to this sexing of kestrels. What you're showing here right at the beginning here are the adults. On the left is the female, on the right is the male. Male's a little bit more colorful. If you look in the middle, you can see the difference in the banding of the tails, but when they're juveniles, that multiple band pattern shows up. And that is probably about a 25, 26-day-old chick on the left, but we can start to see that at about 17 to 18 days. We don't have much to work with, but it's clearly distinctive from what's on the right, where you just have the black band with the white on the tail portion of this. To my knowledge, short of collecting blood and doing analysis, there's no other way until this tail starts to come out can you separate the males from the females, and so you don't do banding before that. Their legs are not really going to get any bigger at that point, but it is pretty easy at this point to tell males from females. Okay, some results here. I want to point out how many chicks, and obviously none of these would be close to banding age, but we got 5 of them in there essentially. We would come back a couple weeks later and we find that we might have again. Everybody has now got a tail long enough that we can separate males from females, but we got one here, again highlighting what I mentioned earlier. Is this a victim of being a late hatch, or is it a victim of being in the wrong corner of the box when it comes to being fed? So 5 guys in there. All right, so here's trend analysis, and I'll again show you a few graphs. And here's one that, besides what you got to see earlier with down feathers, you can't see on the wing yet. Primary feathers, primaries are starting to come in, but the coverts are not yet. So really, this guy isn't ready to have anything really go his way by himself yet. It'll take another week or so. All right, so here's one of these kind of graphs, lots of dots and crazy lines. But if I push a trend line through this, it's pretty clear what the pattern's been. From where we started to where we are today, we had a very high occupancy rate of our boxes, about 50%, and we're down now on average to around 20%. 24% is the mean across that entire time frame. Now, if we just go to boxes that if it was occupied by kestrels, were they successful in fledging young? So if we showed up, we had eggs early on, we had chicks, and we come back at a time when we can band them, we're saying if one or more of those chicks was in that box at the time of banding, we're saying successful. And there's the pattern for that. Unfortunately, kind of declining a little bit. It's been kind of unusual in that we might find eggs and we come back in 3 weeks and we find a female, we have some cracked eggs, we have no chicks. One unusual thing happened 2 years ago, and I think it followed a storm, but we went to a box and it had 4 chicks that were probably about 3 weeks old. They're all dead. And I'm pretty sure what happened, we had a tremendous storm come through the Rio Grande area. And I just think the adults literally got taken out because there's no other explanation. There's no predator that went in there. All these things were intact. They unfortunately just starved. But just because a box is occupied doesn't mean they're going to have success. Although those early years, you can see a couple of them were across the top, that we basically have those years that were really, if it was occupied, they're successful. And then we seem to have this area where it's dropped down. Okay. I am very excited about this number because even if we didn't have the hands-on opportunities for the students, we are looking like we're doing something good for the kestrels. Because probably the boxes are limiting out there. There might be all this good habitat for food, and they could overwinter, but they need a place to nest because they need a cavity. They can't make their own cavity like a woodpecker could do. So I think this is an exciting thing we have to do. And those are opportunities for most cases students to be able to handle these birds and do the banding. All right, so what about the negative impacts? Well, starlings. I promise you we'd come back to starlings. And this bird here, anybody know how starlings got into the country? Yes. Yes. A little louder on that.
What?
A little louder.
Son.
Was it his son? I understood it to be somebody who worshipped Shakespeare from New York City. That's the story I heard. And he brought them over, and so actually going through high school and college, I was not a Shakespeare fan. I apologize to anybody I could offend. But I even dislike Shakespeare even more once I got into this because his days of stargazing, right? So they, by the way, we usually just put wood chips or sawdust in the bottom of the box. They build a nest over top of that. It's usually some grass, straw, whatever. Once in a while they bring trash in there. And so, and they'll lay 3 to 5, up to 7 eggs. And initially, chicks again, like kestrel chicks, are born basically naked. And by the time they get done with the box, it is really rank. It's really bad. But anyway, if we look at the occupancy rates on those, we didn't start tracking this until about 2006. And if I push my trend line through that, this is essentially saying now we're getting more and more of our boxes that are occupied by starlings. Until 2 years ago, I had a sense that the starlings were outcompeting the kestrels for the boxes. And so we tried to get maybe to our checks a little bit earlier. But I mentioned earlier about a monitoring effort north of Columbus in Delaware County. He has almost 90% occupancy of his boxes. And he has witnessed basically starling nests getting taken over by kestrels. And the kestrels end up nesting in that box. So I don't know what it is, and Grace and Chuck, I don't know what it is about Southeast Ohio. We got maybe timid kestrels. But I now, other than getting frustrated when I have starlings in a box, I'm thinking less that the kestrels are actually that the starlings are actually beating the kestrels to the box and occupying it first. But nonetheless, this is a concern. When West Nile virus started to show up years ago, there was some suspicion that maybe somehow there was cross contact with kestrels and starlings, and maybe kestrels were getting it. There's not any evidence that we can really say that's now a likely possibility. It does not appear that. The more recent concern might be something like AI, avian influenza. Again, we don't have enough data. We're not. This isn't a species that's easy to monitor and find out where it dies, and then you're able to get it before it's decomposed enough that you could actually do some analysis. Yes.
So the starling, they're laying their eggs just because it's there. Are they incubating their eggs, or do they expect those kestrels?
Oh no, they're very vigilant. The starlings will nest, they will incubate them, they will raise them. Yeah. I did have one instance, and I think it was last year. I was like, yeah, I knew there were starlings in that box. I went up, and sure enough, it actually had about 4 or 5 kestrel eggs, and the starling eggs were kind of buried down a little bit. So that was one we actually did have a kestrel overtake the starling.
So have you ever run into both species that hatched?
No. Okay. So the last 7 years, we had over 65% of our occupancy by starlings. We've done some landscape analysis. So this is a typical look if you're driving down the highway, what this might look like. But what does a kestrel see? What is the possibility that the kestrel might find here looking at this landscape? So we did some GIS, Geographical Information System analysis, and used some existing data on land cover types. This is a pretty broad category. And we used the time period from 2015 to 2017, so a 3-year period. And we looked at the landscape characteristics for occupied by kestrel boxes and not occupied by kestrel boxes. So we had 37 boxes in this analysis. So this is an overhead view. The red dot in the middle is where the kestrel box was. And so we put a buffer around these boxes and analyzing them 50 meters, 100 meters, 250, 500 meters, 1,500, and 3,000 meters. So the software allows you to figure out how much land cover is in each one of those categories. And essentially, in what's called a principal components analysis, and I know this is getting a little hairy here, but we have one score on this axis and another here. this cluster of boxes here, those are all always occupied by starlings. And there were a bunch of boxes that I put up along 23 between Circleville and Chillicothe. The cluster to the left, the black dots, were partially occupied and some starling. So even though you build it, they may not always come, they might not always be there. And this was part of our justification for taking down some boxes, because I'm not really interested in rearing starlings. All right. So we removed those boxes along that particular part of the route in 2017, and haven't put them up since. And I now, no longer when I drive from that area to go visit my sister, do I look left and right and look at those poles and think we should have boxes out there. It drove me nuts for many years, and then I put them up, and then we basically had starlings. The other thing our analysis gave some indication is, and this is not a knock on agriculture, but there is a difference between a crop field that's producing corn or soybeans versus one that's non-row crop agriculture. Think hay field or alfalfa field or something like that. The top one, there's basically not going to be many mice, and even if there were, even before the picking, it's not something that the kestrels can hunt. As opposed to in a hay field, we may have the opportunity to have a lot of voles produced, and a lot of deer mice and white-footed mice. So these kind of fields can produce also small birds, and if we have a year with a lot of grasshoppers, it's going to produce good feeding habitat. So again, coming back to this diet thing, where are you most likely to find mice? And it's generally going to be, if it's an agricultural field, it's going to be the hay field or the old field kind of setting, not in a crop area. We also found that if we looked and had about 40% forest cover, not right next to the box, but in the general area, that was good for kestrels. And they benefit from that. Now, that's Southeast Ohio. Going back to the group that's monitoring up and around Delaware County, they don't have much in the way of forest. If you're familiar with that part north of Columbus, it's not much in terms of woodland. So they have ag land, and they're getting more developed up there, but they don't have this issue. And it's possible that the reason the forest would be good is it gives perching and overnight cover for recently fledged kestrels. They got someplace they can get out of the elements and maybe have some protection. All right, so I'll wrap this up here with basically some project expansion things that we may still will do. I'm going to hit on growth rates. We take a picture of every kestrel tail. This is my little simple way of not having to write anything down after I take a picture. That's a cheap calculator. Now, if this was 25 years ago, that would have been a $200 calculator, right? This is down to $10. So the first two numbers are plugged in, the first three numbers we plug in are the box number, and the last three numbers are whatever the band number is. So we kind of have that information in the photos right away. But we can take a look at this, and we can look at kestrels from the same clutch. So we'll have all these tail feathers on a given day, and we can see. So we might be able to figure out who maybe was born sooner or who basically was falling behind. Does that matter if males or females? Okay. All these boxes, except for three, are along 4-lane highway corridors. So that's kind of a look at maybe what that looks like. You see some ag land there. You see some maybe housing development areas, stuff like that. I'd like to see us basically look at 2-lane rural roads. One is you probably have much less human development. Two, you have much less traffic. And again, if I'm wanting to go out and look for kestrels in the fall or the winter or January, February, I'm usually on back roads looking, because one, I'm driving a lot slower. Two, I got a lot less traffic. And three, it's very likely you're going to see them perched up. And you could drive by slowly and they'll stay. But it would be interesting to see if we could have higher occupancy rate of the boxes, because normally, if you don't have a lot of buildings around, you probably don't have starlings, or at least you don't have them at the same rate. But that would be something to look All right, and then the last thing here, and I just started this year, so I'm really excited about this, but if anybody wants to come over and join me in October, November, December, we can look through thousands of pictures. I've taken a high-end trail camera and I've cut a hole in the top of 4 boxes. Okay, I actually built a special housing on top of that, and I programmed it and this has an adjusted 10-inch focal distance. Okay, so I programmed it to take a picture every 15 minutes. I'm not setting it up to say that they show up, turn on the video or whatever. So this is where you're welcome, let me know, come over, we'll look through these, and we'll figure out what proportion of the time kestrels are showing, when they're showing up, because I'm starting this March 1st. When are kestrels basically coming to even look at that box? They're not laying eggs in March. They're probably laying them earliest in late April, okay? When is the first hatch? How many days does it take for all those eggs to hatch? And then how's it going on from there? And then who's coming in to feed? Now, I could miss it in between the 15 minutes, okay? There's 14 minutes I'm not documenting stuff, but I should get a good feel for it. And then what's the rate? Who's leaving? You know, on the first day that somebody leaves, or 2 leaving, or 3 leaving. And because we've come sometimes and we knew there were 5 in there, and we show up and we've got 2 left. We must have missed some. They fledged before we got back to them. So try to look at this. I put out 4 boxes like this year, and 3 of them had kestrels in them. So I'm just super excited. The 4th one had stars. So that nest is dispatched, but probably what's going to happen is adults are going to come back and get back in that box. So I actually have some data on the starting thing as well. So I'm kind of excited about this. If I can stand looking through, next time I calculate, probably by the time I will take these down, mid-July, I'm probably going to have, what's the calculation of 15 times 4 by 24 by some data? I'm going to have 10,000 photos of each box. Okay. But we can pick up this various information, and I think it will be kind of interesting. People have put cameras in boxes, but mostly it's on a video basis. So I'm not seeing anybody who's actually documented some of these other things on this quantitative basis. All right, so to finish up here with a really couple of little short videos. This one is again a very quick release. Took no time for that to happen, obviously. And this is as recent as it gets. This was last Thursday. So one individual is taking the kestrel out. She's done this many times, so she feels very confident. She doesn't wear gloves. She's going to transfer it to another individual. Kat, you might recognize this individual.
Hey, Mom, turn it away.
Inventory, single photo, close up. She goes around and gets her smartphone so she can take a picture of it. This is an adult, so it'll be released. 2, 3, go. That's it. So, I want to say thanks to you. I want to say thanks to our small Falcon. These guys are really cool. I'm assuming, has everybody seen a kestrel before? Most of you seen them? Okay. They are a very, very cool bird. So, with that, again, thanks again, Joshua, Lisa, for the opportunity to speak about kestrel. If you got questions about answers? Go ahead. Yes?
Do you have, are the starlings the only ones that can be problems or other species?
Nobody else. I monitor a lot of bluebird boxes. Snakes sometimes get to those. We've never had any indication of snakes get into them. bunch of bluebird boxes, and raccoons are a very prevalent predator. Raccoons are not venturing up the billboard posts, they're not venturing up the backs of the highway signs. So no, I have nobody else, and I've never found any owls, screech owl or something like that in that box. So nobody else appears to be a threat to them, at least in this region that I know.
We visit a group of Canada geese on the Eastwood Lake, and the ranger said I could feed them popcorn and not breads. Popcorn.
Which ranger was it?
They're so
Deanna and Devin.
Okay.
The starlings are in there.
Yeah.
They're just, and I'm from Southern California, so we don't have starlings.
Yeah. That's good.
Nuisance.
Yeah. They're just, not only, I mean, our feedlot situations can help promote those, and that's not good. So it's a species that just doesn't should be that.
Just a question.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you thought pesticides contributed to it at all.
I don't. Nobody's done any tissue analysis that I know of kestrels. One is we wouldn't want to sacrifice them, and it's pretty much a violation that, other than maybe extracting a feather or two, and that gets to be pretty expensive. But I don't think we have anything close to what we had with like ospreys and DDT years ago. The mice are relatively short-lived that they're eating, so they're not eating. You know, fish have a chance to bioaccumulate, and as smaller fish get eaten by bigger fish and gone. I don't think there's any evidence for that yet. That's what I wouldn't want to say we're off the hook with using herbicides, pesticides, and stuff like that, but I don't think there's much evidence yet pointing enough to all to say that that's a key factor. But that means we should keep looking for that. Yes?
I was wondering, with the boxes being next to four-lane highways, is there a concern for car strikes that you have to do anything to mitigate that, like with the boxes at a certain height or anything like that?
Yeah. To my knowledge, and again, understand we're not monitoring this 24/7. I don't know. I've never seen a kestrel dead along the road, and I would look for a lot of road kills. It's really a sad part of my existence. Trying to find what was that dead over there in the splatter, but I've not seen any of that. The fact that they use the median strips usually for hovering suggests to me that they're pretty comfortable at avoiding traffic. But ironically, the group that's had the boxes up in Delaware County, they first started having all their boxes on the back of highway signs. And kestrels were not getting hit, but the highway signs were getting hit, knocking the boxes off. So they totally walked away from putting them on the back of highway signs and put them. They actually got permission to put them on utility poles on rural roads, which is what we would have to see to do that one alternative. You only have a choice really when you put one is to put it on the backside. I usually, if the highway's here and here's the sign, I usually put the box as far as I can away from the highway. But sometimes we've got them just from where the berm is 20 feet maybe, 25 feet, and we've had boxes and kestrels are nested and they successfully brought out. Yeah. So that's a good question, but I think it's the other thing that seems to matter, and I think we've had a little more success on the highway signs lately, is that's just a more manicured and easy in and out. And sometimes the billboard, most of the time the billboard company is going to keep everything they can away from the front of their sign because they want to go see it. But on the back side, they might not care. I mean, you may have some saplings and some trees over time they grow up, and if they're growing this close to the back of that sign, then you don't have quite as clear sight. Kestrels do like open.
Does it matter to them which way the hole is facing, as far as
Yeah,
the wind?
in a paper we just published, we looked at that a little bit. Understand, we didn't have a chance to do a random thing
Right.
with the highway signs. So they're usually on the other side, but it seemed like there was a little tendency if we had boxes facing east, which means that you're driving down the highway going what? You're going, you gotta be going east, and the signs over there on that side, excuse me, on this side, that's where there's probably, if I had a choice, I would have it face to the east, southeast, or maybe northeast. And the reason is most of our prevailing winds and our cooler temperatures kind of come from the west and the southwest. Probably heavy rains come from that way. One reason I'm all over the box, by the way, if you look at the design, it's got a foil thing on it and all that. I had some instances where it looked like water must have actually got between the backboard and the roof, and it looked like it was wet on the inside. So I modified my design to pretty much eliminate the chance unless the rain comes like that direction. But I think it probably matters a little bit because for most bird species in our region, they usually don't like things opening to the west. Just it's a good question. Yes?
In the films, you were showing that the inside of a lot of boxes were whitewashed. Is that just bird dew?
Yeah. I wouldn't want to be there, but I can imagine there must, and they obviously got to have good hearing. So they must know when somebody else is about ready to make an elimination process, because they have to probably close their eyes, because we've sometimes pulled them out of the box and just squeezing them a little bit, and then they just whitewash. And every once in a while, a student who's holding the bird like this has forgotten that, and they get whitewashed. So you learn very quickly to kind of hold the bird at this angle, head over here, and tail going this way. So if it squirts that way, but yeah, it could be white plaster all the way up to the top and even the ceiling of the boxes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Now I've been around a lot of really rank smells. It's not the worst of those smells, but open it up right away and you recognize it. Your songbirds, for the most part, until they get about to fledge the last couple of days, they produce fecal sacs, and then those get hauled off. But that's not the way the kestrels do it. And so I just think really somebody just backs up and fires, and the rest of you, good luck. I've never pulled out a kestrel though that was whitewashed. I mean, I've never picked one out of the box and like, oh, it must have got hit on its wing or its tail. We recognize it right away. So somehow they sort that out, and it doesn't happen. But yeah, the box, and that's the other thing. Like if for some reason we thought we had kestrels and we didn't get there on a return trip soon enough, and we come back and we see nothing in the box in terms of kestrels, and we don't see eggshells, but the thing is whitewashed, we know at least one kestrel survived from that.
So do you do anything to clean the boxes after they're on bond?
No, I'm very lazy about that. And the kestrels, these come back, and over the course of the winter, it kind of breaks down a little bit. And I suppose I could get out there with a wide edged putty knife and clean out. But no, I'm sorry. If you want to come over when we look at photos, I'd be glad to have you do that. But it doesn't seem to matter to them. They just come back. The only thing we do every year is refresh the sawdust or the wood chips. Yes.
So since you're being with, have you seen any examples like they have eyesight fidelity?
We don't end up catching every adult that is in a box, but we have probably 5 or 6 times recaptured an adult in that box, abandoned individual that was. So yeah, I think that happened. The thing about overall about band returns, of those 400 plus animals that I said were banned, we've only got information over 27 years back from 2. One was found, I think was recaptured in Tennessee, and this one was found had perished in Georgia. But I can imagine that for those that for the most part make it over the winter and stay around, they probably come back to the same home. So I think there's probably some loyalty there. And I also think that where we've had situations where we've had kestrels for like 6 years in a row in that box, and then the next year, we don't have anybody. I think that pair probably perished, just didn't make it. Like, okay, it doesn't live forever. Okay, well, I really appreciate your coming out tonight. Hope there's one or two things that relative to birds and kestrels in particular, and feel free to look at the equipment there, and especially those bands. I really want all the young people to pick up the band and look at it and rattle those numbers out. You're microscopic.